The fight between Paulo Costa and Robert Whittaker at UFC 298 definitely exceeded my expectations, and definitely those of a lot of fans. It definitely scalped fight of the night and what was a back and forth battle. Paulo Costa, I mean, man, after a 2-year layoff, I did not expect him to come back the way he did and put it on Robert Whittaker, and he almost finished him within the first round. So for those of you that didn't watch the fight, in the first round, Robert Whittaker was largely winning that contest and landing more strikes. But towards the end of the first round, it was very similar to when we seen Robert Whittaker drop his title to Israel Adesanya, where he got caught and, he got clipped pretty bad towards the end of that round. I mean, who knew Paulo Costa could throw spinning kicks that good? And he was throwing them all night and was incredibly crisp, incredibly fast. And I was like, man, I've never seen Paulo Costa kick this good. It was absolutely incredible and incredibly effective. Robert Whittaker had to be switched on all night to be able to defend those kicks and prevent a knockout. And he did almost get finished. Within the first round, he did get saved by the bell. Now, it's arguable as to what, many people think of whether he would have got knocked out or not. So he was definitely fighting back, but there's no doubt in my mind that he was absolutely rocked. And this one was an absolute war, Robert Whittaker got absolutely blooded up badly. Now, I think the decision went the correct way, but what do you guys think is going to actually happen next, within the middleweight division? Obviously, we had Duplessis beating Robert Whittaker and then moving on to beating Sean Strickland to become the new middleweight champion. But I've got an idea and something that isn't necessarily too far out there. It's what I think is going to happen within the middleweight division. Obviously the UFC is looking at it as Duplessis, great fighter, but doesn't necessarily have as much star power as what Robert Whittaker does. And there's also another guy, that's been fairly quiet, Israel Adesanya. And I think this sets up perfectly a fight between Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya. This would be the third time that these two would face each other inside the octagon. I mean, all the chips are just laying out perfectly for this contest, in my opinion. I mean, when I look down that division, we've obviously got Jared Cannonier and Marlon Vettori, but I think up next, it's definitely going to be Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya in a number one contender fight. Number one contender fight to see who will be facing Duplessis for that middleweight strap. And I think it's just the right move at this point. But I also want to touch on Robert Whittaker's performance within that fight. Now, obviously, he did great and he won, but as I touched on earlier, with someone like Alexander Volkanovski, I think this year we're going to be seeing a changing of the guard, and we're definitely going to be seeing that in the middleweight division if we haven't already. Who would have thought last year that Duplessis or Sean Strickland would have been the middleweight champion? So I'm quite excited for, how things are going to play out at middleweight. Obviously, we've got some great talent coming up within that division with the likes of, Jack Hermanson, Khamzat Chimaev, and the like. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to be the champion at the end of this year and if Duplessis can actually, maintain his number one spot as the champion. But I think that's what we're going to see next. Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. Maybe a potential Australian card. I know the UFC signed a deal with Sydney, Australia to have 4 UFC events on over the coming years. So it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play out, if they're going to take advantage of obviously Robert Whittaker's star power as well as Israel Adesanya's, considering they're from that region. But all around, that was a fantastic fight. I didn't necessarily like what I seen from Robert Whittaker, even though I think he sort of felt, he fought great, don't get me wrong, but considering Paulo Costa had such a long layoff, and he always does bring it within his fight, it was a bit concerning to see how much Robert Whittaker did struggle with him. Especially when you look at, Paulo Costa's last fight against Luke Rockhold, who was just basically almost a dead body at this point and who's towards the end of his career. He definitely struggled within that contest and, it was definitely a clear win for him. But Luke Rockhold put up a fantastic fight considering where he's at in his career. And it does raise some questions for me about, where Robert Whittaker's potentially at. And I think the fight with Israel Adesanya will give us some more answers with that. But he got the win. Fantastic job. Fantastic event at UFC 298. Let me know what you guys thought of the whole card as in its entirety, as well as the contest between Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa. Take care, everyone. Bye.